Righty. I'm Tony Blair, and you're?
Alan Powers.
And you're?
Tom Powers.
Yes. And all of us are more or less Pulaskians.
Pulaski.
Well, we were raised in Rural Retreat, Wythe County, but we moved to Pulaski during the Depression. I came, well, Alan was just a baby, but I came down here during the Depression. My daddy had a business in Rural Retreat, and he lost everything he had in the Depression. So we moved to Pulaski because there was more work down here, and there wasn't any. If you wasn't a farmer in Rural Retreat, you didn't have anything.
That was 1932.
1932.
We moved here in '32, but I was born in 1925. I'm the eldest. And I was born in 1925. And the Depression came along in 1929. And that changed the whole world, really, because it was bad all over the world. And after we came to Pulaski, basically because my dad had a very good business. He was in produce. There was a lot of that in the country back in those days. You got to remember, this is Wythe County of 1925 to 32, because we left in 32. But we came to Pulaski, and the work was still good. And Pulaski was really doing much better than most of the towns around.
Really?
That was in thing. Well, they had woman's silk stocking business. They had two furniture plants, Coleman and Pulaski Veneer Corporation, plus lots of small type industry, and they had several more in the woman's ready to wear. And then in 1936, I guess, Jefferson Mills came in, and they employed a good bunch of people. But times were tough. That was after we came down here. It was 1932, and they were really tough because my father was already in bad shape, and they were trimming his. His problems had started actually during the war.
Which war?
During the Spanish-American War. 1898. And he went to one of those islands, and he wound up with that tropical disease.
Malaria?
Malaria.
Malaria. And it stayed with him. And then the hard times for him and I came when after Daddy got sick.
Now, you're talking about your brother here.
Yeah, my brother and I, because we were almost inseparable. We went everywhere together, and we were close to that.
Well, we kind of had to be in order.
We didn't have.
We couldn't.
And our whole what we were after was survival.
Now, we were discussing other members of the family.
Right. There was 13 in our family altogether. And like Tom was saying, Tony, we moved down here in 1932. And my daddy was sick when we came here. So he kept getting worse and worse, and he lived 3 years after that.
Mm-hmm.
In 1935, when we had to take him to, I believe it was Johnson City, Tennessee, to VA,
Mm-hmm.
and where we'd get ready to operate on him and was get ready to remove both of his legs, and because he had developed gangrene.
Mm-hmm.
And before they could do that, why, he died.
Mm.
And then my mother was sitting there, and she had never worked in her life, and I'll never forget it. And so, after he died, why, she was just sitting there with all them children. And back at that time, why, you didn't get much help. You had a little help at the mayor's office, but was nothing real good, not enough to take care of 13 children. So we went on like that, and Tom and I, we sold papers, and my gosh, we shined shoes, and we cleaned bathrooms for Hotel Pulaski and Maple Shade Inn, and we just done anything we could do to survive and make a living.
So you didn't really play around much?
No, we didn't. I don't think Tom or I either had what you'd say a real blossoming childhood. It was.
Well, you've lived to be 90, so it must have blossomed enough. So
We done pretty good, though, didn't we, Tom?
I think we did.
Mm-hmm.
And I think we had my mother had 7 sons in service during World War II.
Mm-hmm.
And she was recognized for that. The paper recognized. There's several pieces in the paper that showed where she had 7 sons in service. And there was over the period of from when World War II started up to the end of the Korea, well, not the end, but when the fighting ceased in Korea.
Mm-hmm.
And but the difficulty was as things got worse, the government finally put out what they call the WPA, Works President's Administration, and they allowed a man to work on various jobs that they more or less created in the community. And that was turned into, but the money was so scarce, they would hire half of the people that were looking for work, men. Mm-hmm. They would give them $3 a week. They would work 3 days for $1 a day. Mm-hmm. Then they would cut them off and hire another group of people and give them $3 a day. Mm-hmm. And you were supposed to try to, now how do you feed it? Even in those days when things were certainly less money, but it's difficult to feed a family of 13, well, actually we had, if you count mother and daddy at that time, we were talking about 15 people.
Well, I have a question, some more questions here about that. One, did all the brothers survive the wars?
Yes.
Yeah.
Good.
We had 7 overseas at one time.
Mm-hmm.
And all of them came back, and I think Lloyd Matthews, that used to be a surveyor in Pulaski, he wrote a book, and so did Mr. Smith at B.D. Smith Printing. He wrote a book on Pulaski County. He had all the Powers brothers in there, which I thought was very nice. But they all came back, and all of them.
And what about
done
your
pretty
sisters?
well. We had 4 sisters, and we have 3 that's deceased,
Mm-hmm.
and we have 1 now that's living, and she's
Okay, 4, but I was trying to add, you said 13, was it, or?
13.
Okay, what happened? There's 2 missing.
Well, there's 13. We had 9 boys and 4 sisters.
Okay.
Counting me and Tom.
Mm-hmm. All right, so 2 boys didn't go overseas.
That's right. That's,
Oh, okay.
That's correct. They were still young and
Mm-hmm.
they didn't.
Okay. Well, all right. So, how did you get into the armed forces?
Well, Tony, and Mama had so many kids there, and
Mm-hmm.
we always lived in just a moderate house. We couldn't afford anything anyway. We'd stay usually about 30 days, and then when rent come due, we had to move. Then, but Tom, we had to take off. So anyway, so I got 16 and wasn't really doing all that well in school. So in 1944, well, I had a brother that was in the Merchant Marines and had been in all the, back in the 30s.
Mm-hmm.
He was my oldest brother. So it kind of fascinated me, and I wanted to get away from home too. So I went in the Merchant Marines and got my mother to sign for me at 16. And that was in 1944. So then I went to Sheep's Head Bay, and the Coast Guard trained me, and stayed up there till I finished school. And then I went to Merchant Marines, went to work for Age Wool Company, and
Mm-hmm.
then I made several trips. I went some trips in the North Atlantic, and I rode out a hurricane, and I stayed in there for, I don't know, a couple of year or so. And then I came out, and I couldn't get a ship out, so without attending the meetings all the time. I was with Seafarers International Union. So Miss Fink was getting ready to draft me, so I decided to go ahead and join. And I joined the Army, went in the Army, and stayed in there till, I guess it was around 49. Come out, had the same trouble. So I went back in the Air Force, and I stayed in the Air Force all during the Korean War, and up till I got out about 1953,
Mm-hmm.
54, somewhere along in there.
And Tom, during this time, how did you get into this?
Well, I stayed in Pulaski and kept taking any kind of job I could do. And I did a multitude of different types of things while I was going to school. And there was a gentleman in the school system at that time called one of the Ost boys, and he had what they call he helped boys that were get them a job in a local place, and they could make a little money and get credit for it at school too, because I wanted to try to finish school. And I enjoyed school and liked school. So I continued to hustle the best I could and work and get it. Until 1941, 42, I guess it was, 42. The boys in my class, a lot of them were very well-known Pulaskians, and became even better known later on. But they decided we all pledged that we'd go in the Army.
Mm-hmm.
And I went in the Army in 1943, I guess it was, and I went in the Army and went down to Camp Lee. All of different ones went different places, and I went down to Camp Lee, and Camp Lee sent me to Boston, Massachusetts, because they had some difficulty up there doing something or other, and anyone that was 6'1" and pretty good health and could handle themselves, well, they wanted them.
Now,
And this was in pretty hard. There was still, the war hadn't caught up with everybody, and the Depression was still lingering.
well, pardon me just a minute. Camp Lee is in New Jersey or
No, Virginia.
Virginia?
Yeah.
Okay. I
And-
think there's a
but-
Lee up there too.
But they sent me all the way to Boston.
Mm-hmm.
And that's where my life really started, because I met my wife up there.
Mm-hmm.
And we went together a while, and then she decided, and we decided that we were going to get married, but she decided that we were going to get married a little quicker than I thought. So I was on a leave I had went from Boston to Leonard Wood, Missouri, where I was in the engineers. And that was about that was sometime in late 43. Well, when I finally, I went from Leonard Wood, Missouri to Louisiana, back to New Jersey and back home for a stay at home right before I went overseas. And this was in World War, Europe.
Mm-hmm.
I was going to Europe. And when I got home, she was here, and she said that we were going to be married at home.
I think there's I've heard about some kind of tale about a bridge, and you, and she.
Oh, the bridges that was later in Korea.
Mm-hmm.
And we were working on a bridge. Since then I had become a sergeant, and I was in World War II. I became a sergeant,
Mm-hmm.
and I was working on the bridge, and the Chinese slipped into our lines. We didn't know for sure what was Chinese or Koreans or who, but some of the enemy slipped in. And they fired on us while we were building the bridge. Well, they hurt a couple of them. Like I said, I was managing the bridge, so I had to do something with that. And in the process, I had one end of a 2x12, 20 foot long. And the men were spread out on that same thing, because we were trying to it was a base plate for my bridge.
Mm-hmm.
And we were trying to put it in place.
Mm-hmm.
But when the shots came in, the boys dropped it, and they fell back with, try to find security or something to hide behind. And in the process, I was standing with one end of that 12x12,
Mm-hmm.
and they're not exactly light.
Mm-hmm.
So when the first thing I knew, I was standing there one end of, and you can't hold, one man can't hold even one end of a 12x12. So what happened, it not only went off me, but it dropped down on my leg.
Mm-hmm.
And it just numbed my leg, and this leg became white.
Mm-hmm.
From the thing. Black. It had all the circulation that stopped in this leg. And they sent me to the hospital, but I had to fly out of the area we were in. We were in Korean area, and we had to fly out of that in one of those little airplanes, you know, like when they first came out,
Probably C-47.
yeah, no,
46.
there was no P-47. It was a little where they had the balloons on both sides of them, and they put the two people. They could only carry two people, and they
Was it
helicopter.
a helicopter?
Yeah, it was a regular helicopter. But it was one of the first ones, and there wasn't many good ones around, and they could carry two people. When I went up, I realized, when I woke up, I was up in the sky. And I looked up, and I couldn't see nothing but clouds. And I looked down, and I couldn't see nothing but clouds. And I think, well, now, I'm going to be meeting my maker here pretty quick. And I really didn't think because you couldn't see a thing. You couldn't tell where you were at. I knew I'd been hurt, but I didn't know how bad. You never know. And so I looked up and I said, well, now, and I remember everything. A lot of the things I did when I was there, I said, well, I better check all this stuff out. And it seemed like to me everything I ever done bad came before my eyes while I was looking up. Because I thought the next man I was going to be talking to was the main man. And so, anyway, I went back to, they took us to what we call a Pusan in the hospital. They had 10 hospitals. And I stayed there 7 weeks while that doctor said, well, we may have to take that leg off because it's still black, still no circulation. And finally, the circulation started in one edge of it, and it finally we got all right, but it remained. I have no feeling from here, that's why I walk with a cane. And I have had more trouble than that with it. I had no feeling in this leg and very little in this one. No circulation at all. And he kept saying he was going to take it off, but finally it began to turn just a little white in one of the areas. And he said, well, we'll see what happens. And he did. And it took a little, I stayed in the hospital 7 weeks waiting for it to change. Each morning him telling me that he may have taken my leg off. Anyway, I went from there to, I'd already been in Europe, and I got along good in Europe. Now I've seen 64 days of constant combat because that's the way I got my common infantry badge. And it paid a little extra money, $10. And because but that's what you have to be in. You have to be in combat 64 days, constant kind of combat, which I was, but I never got a scratch.
And that we're talking about World War II.
We're talking, yeah, World War II. My problems came in Korea, not in World War II.
Well,
But by that time I had made one of the top sergeants. I was next to my next sergeancy would have been, if I would have stayed in the Army, I would have been master sergeant. And because I had already been then 6 years in the service. And I went into did what finally was left. They let me go back to my company. Well, I was so tickled to get back to my company, and and get back to work and the thing, because I liked what I did. I wanted to do it, and so I went back to my company, but it wasn't too long after that, and until President Truman he allowed all other men like me, World War II veterans. They had and when Korea first started, they needed men like me, like of my knowledge was used to because the new soldiers coming in were young draftees from the States, but they didn't have any leaders for them. So that's why Truman added time, even though I was officially over. He kept adding more time to my service.
Service time.
Yeah, my service time. And I accepted that because I had asked for it. I wouldn't have had to have done it, but I never heard of a police action back in those days. We never had a police action. We either had a war or we didn't have a war.
Mm-hmm.
And so
I wouldn't call it a police action.
I wouldn't call it either.
Not hardly.
I understand it's the Republic of Korea, and that's ROK, and being a geologist, I was really thrilled. I saw some pictures of it. It has a lot of rocks.
Sure did. And it had a lot of North Korea had a lot of cold weather. People don't realize that.
That was the coldest place.
Coldest place I've ever been in my life.
Was in Korea. It's just a penetrating kind of cold. It's such a different cold than it is here. But I might say this, this is something unusual. I remember in 1943, and Tom was going to Van, and Tom, what he told her, I don't know, but he told her some pretty good things. So anyway, I heard this knock on the door, and I opened the door, and this beautiful woman, she was as pretty as she could be. And she introduced herself and says, Amanda Tremonti. I told her I was Alan Powers, and she said, well, she says, I come to bury Tom. And I said, you come to what? And she said, yes, and I come to bury Tom. So anyway, Tom was on his way to Germany, so they got it together right quick. And so I was the best man at Tom's wedding in 1943. And I was just a kid, and of course I left the following year, 1944. Wasn't much reason. So then I stayed in there for quite a while, and then I got in the Army, and then I went in the Air Force. And I was in Korea in, I guess, 49. It was right before the war, and I might mention this, is the Japanese had just tore Korea all to pieces. Korea was just a basket case at that time. And they had all these big cranes and bulldozers and stuff. We had to walk guard duty. This was just right before the war. The war started in 1950, the Korean conflict did. And they used to get up in those, and they had stacks and stacks of tires, and they'd get up in those tires and shoot them guards as they come by. And I walked guard, and I would freeze. I was so scared. But anyway, and then I came out of there, and then I came back home, and then, like I said before, things were so rough, and I just went back into the Air Force. And then I stayed in the Air Force for, I don't know, 3 or 4 years, and last place I was in Saudi Arabia.
How was that?
It was quite an ordeal, but I didn't have to pull any mess duty or anything, and we was there to fly the king around. I've been Saud and his regime, his family and all. And then they had Aramco, Arabian American Oil Company there at the time, which was big. And so I was, stayed there for, I guess it was just over a year. Then came home and I've had some experiences at sea. I was, while I was in Merchant Marines.
All right. Saudi Arabia, and you didn't have to have mess duty in Saudi Arabia. You were in the Air Force. Other people were flying the king around.
Right, that was primarily our duty. We only had 100 that was there. And the Secret Service or FBI came in, Pulaski, and checked me out, make sure that I didn't have any Jewish descent, no criminal record or anything like that before I went over there. And we was just mainly there to take care of the king and to Aramco, Arabian American Oil Company. And they had one thing that was real interesting is they had a fellow there that executed the criminals there when you done something bad enough, and he would behead you. They'd bring them out, and they'd be tied up, and their hands would be behind them, and he'd punch them in the belly. When he did, they'd just behead them. And they'd put that up on the fence, and the ones we had there, they would close the everything down to try to find out where the beheading was going on. And they'd hang everything up on the fence. If you stole something, they'd take your hand off. And you could see these things on the fence. Every man, woman, and child had to watch it. And they would leave that person hanging up there till they'd hang him up and leave him hanging there till it just got so bad to stay.
Hopefully this was, unfortunately, for the Saudi Arabians.
Saudi Arabian.
We're not talking about...
No, not the American people, but it was just such a terrible thing. And I had some pictures of it and all I brought back. And then I had one other thing that happened to me I used to shuttle up and down the Mediterranean when I was working in the Merchant Marines. And we went into Heraklion Creek. We got off the ship and we was just kind of mulling around, entertaining ourselves as best we could. And they had this big, huge crowd of people there. And we went up and got real close to that and was watching. And all of a sudden, the guns began to just blast away. And they killed every one of those people. Just shot them, just innocent people.
Now, who did this?
Well, you know what? I never did know. I guess it was the Germans, maybe the Germans.
Well, now, how did you get to see the Germans? Oh, the Germans were killed, or the...
Yeah, the Germans killed the Greeks.
Oh, the Greeks.
Yeah, they had Heraklion. Crete was an island off of... You had Piraeus, and then you had Athens, and then you had Heraklion, Kavala.
Well, how were you able to see this if you were an American soldier and you were able to see...
Well, we had pulled in there on a ship in the last war. And we got off a ship there, and which we could do without any problem. And we happened to walk up to where all these people were at, and that's when they opened fire and shot all of them. So that's about one of the worst things I've ever seen.
All right. So we're talking about Saudi Arabia. We've got that taken care of. All right. Both of you were in the Korean War.
Yes.
You didn't suffer any injuries or anything there, did you? Or did you?
No.
But Tom, you did. Came through World War II without a scratch and then go to the Korean War and have leg trouble.
Sure. I had more trouble in Korea than I did in constantly being in a war in World War II.
You got there.
Because I'll tell you something. When you fight the Germans, you fight some tough people. I had a lot of, I was interested in the German people themselves.
Mm-hmm.
And I talked with a lot of them. And I asked him one time, I said, and he kind of hit me back with my own problems.
Mm-hmm.
Because he said, I asked what an elderly woman over there that we kind of, she was nice to us and treated us with decency, and
Mhm.
most of them did. And she said, I said, why did y'all accept Hitler?
Mm-hmm.
And she said, after the World War I,
Mm-hmm.
well, World War I was a pre World War II.
Mm-hmm.
The World War II was fought because of World War I, in a manner of speaking,
Mm-hmm.
because the terms that the Allies gave to the Germans were very harsh for the.
Mm-hmm.
And it gets back to the same thing that we were suffering here. But the Germans had suffered so much because they had put such hardships on them, the French and the English and the Americans, and especially the gentlemen from Russia.
Mm-hmm.
And so I asked her, why would you buy it? She said, she looked me in the eye and she said, have you ever been hungry? I said, yeah. I said, I was hungry during the depression we had. And she said, well, your depression was small compared to ours because we were left with nothing. And Hitler did one thing. He started to feed the people. He gave the men jobs. They built one of the most beautiful roads that was
Autobahn.
the pre-runner of most of the best roads in this country. And that was the Autobahn. And I asked her, I said, she said, we knew what Hitler was, but she said he did something that nobody else would do. He fed us. He gave us a chance to eat. He gave us a chance to work. She said he gave us a chance to be human beings again.
That's always a good thing, to give people a chance to be human beings.
That's right.
That's true.
And I thought the thing, but my experience in Germany was kind of limited because there was so much going on in so many different ways, like the German women was killing American soldiers. They'd entice them in some kind of illicit proposition, and then they would kill them.
Mm-hmm.
Because this is what they had told them to do. The authorities had told them to do. But my biggest problem came when my sergeant was killed. We were down behind a log, and he had a pair of binoculars, and he was trying to see. We were getting anti-aircraft fire,
Mm-hmm.
and somebody was using anti-aircraft guns, just like you'd use regular guns. And he wanted to spot it so we could get some artillery in on them, because we couldn't move. And he leaned up, he raised up over the log to get his binoculars so he could see. if he could tell where it was coming from, because he could radio it back and get it took care of. But the minute he raised up, a sniper got him right between the eyes.
Mm-hmm.
I thought he was just ducking down again. But when I said, "Sergeant," and he didn't answer me, I knew or something. And he'd been shot right between the eyes. And I lost one of the best. He had saved my life so many times because he had kind of taken me over when I first came in. He said, back then, in those days, I had red hair. Now I don't have any.
Mm-hmm.
But that's all right.
Yeah, it is.
And he said, he said, "Are you scared, Red?" And I said, I didn't make any.
Is that what they called you then?
Yeah, well, I had red hair.
I did too.
You did too?
Yes, I did.
Anyway, I said, yeah, I'm scared. And he said, now I told this in a different way to the paper. I don't know whether we should put this in there or not. But I told the paper that when they were interviewing Alan and I, well, I told them that if I would have stopped right quick, it would have had an operation. I had to have an operation to take my nose out of his posterior. But the first day I was with him, he said, we were to go to this house and take this and search this house.
Mm-hmm.
Well, what was on the thing? Well, when I got to the house, I got there first, and he said, and I started to go in the door, and he said, "Don't do that." I said, "Why?" He said, "Always send your calling card in first." I said, "What's my calling card?" He said, "You got a grenade in your pocket." He said, "Throw that in first, and it'll clear a way for you." And I said, "That sounds like a good idea." And that's the way he did for the next, I'd say 7 or 8 months till he died. And the times he saved my life was so unbelievable, because I was really I was not a real good soldier.
Mm-hmm.
I became a good one because of him, but I was not a real very good soldier going in.
What was his name?
Sergeant Mixer,
Mixer?
yeah. And
Well, I think we ought to know who that
he was
was.
about,
Mixer.
I'd say he was probably around 30-ish. He might have been into 30, a little bit or behind. But he was about 30 years old.
Mm-hmm.
But he was he saved my life so many times that if I'd had to pay him for it, I couldn't afford it.
Well, you all got back to Pulaski finally, and so did it, of course you went to Pulaski, then got into Korea. But sort of to sum up, how do you think that changed the rest of your lives?
Oh, it changed mine tremendously. Of course, my wife did too. We had a beautiful wife, and we got married in 1956. We've been married 60 years, and it's been just wonderful. It's been great. I think both of us, our lives have been changed tremendous. But I think probably more than World War II in the Korean War, I think changed us both. The depression and being brought up like we was, and had to survive and had to work and do the things that we done, Tony. It was just a matter of survival. We had a wonderful mother, and She never worked a day in her life. Of course, she had her hands full with all those 13 kids.
Mm-hmm.
And we had a lot of brothers, and they're all gone now. And Tom and I, for some reason or other, the Lord has kept us around here. I don't know why, because the oldest one was John. He had the stores, Food Fair and all those stores. And he was 80 when he died, and he was the oldest man that ever lived in Power's generation. Now here's Tom, is 92, and I'll be 90. And why we are an exception to the case, I don't know, unless our genes are just outstanding or something. But we've both been in business, and I've been in several businesses, real estate, and had car wash and trucks, tractors and trailers on the road. I had a laundromat.
Mm-hmm.
And I was in real estate. Work for last job I had was with Century 21 to work for them for after I'd retired. I quit and sold out everything. And then Tom's he's been a builder, and he's done a lot.
That engineering helped, didn't it?
Ma'am?
That engineering helped,
He
didn't
did a lot of building.
Oh, I don't really understand. Sometimes I'm amazed at when Alan and another brother, three of us went into business together.
Mm-hmm.
And Alan and his older brother didn't get along too well. And so he said he was going to do something else, and he did.
Mm-hmm.
And Bill died shortly after that. He died at 49.
Mm-hmm.
He was only, so it changed my life radically. Now, my wife, she and I lived together and stayed together in 71 years, which is a pretty good space of time.
Yes, it is.
But in the process of coming home, after I came home, I had even considered staying in the Army because I'd done so well. I thought I had done so well. And but I came home, and the best job I could get when I first came home was managing a service station. And I like to tell people, because back in those days you could buy 5 gallons worth of gas for $1. But they wanted, but in order to get the $1, you had to check his oil, kick his wheels, clean his windshield, and just about everything. He wanted the best service there was, and all you got out of it was $1, and you didn't get it. But anyway, it kept me eating a while. Then I sold candy for a company, for Thomas Houston Peanut Company. I went to work for them, sold candy. Then I went from them to an insurance company. I sold insurance. I done anything and everything that I could. Now, my education didn't hurt me too much, because most people only had a high school education back in those days. They didn't. You had a few people that were able to pay for, their fathers and mothers were able to pay for the cost of their schooling, which I would have loved to have taken. But I guess there's one time, this lady right over here, she's my daughter, and she's, back when she was very young, the doctor told me and her mother, said, that he wanted to see me. I was working, I think I was working at the Arsenal then. I loved to work down there. And anyway, she said, you bring your husband and come in. And I went to, I sweated that weekend, and Friday, I believe Thursday or Friday, we were to go to the doctor's office. And he thought my daughter had leukemia, and she was 99% sure. We went into the doctor's office, and I finally told her, I said, ask her if she wouldn't find somebody that would give me that was an expert in that field. I wanted to see to make sure before I done anything else. And I went to she found somebody in Charlottesville. And we went down there. My other brother went with me, John. And we went down there and took her with us. And he examined her, and he said, come out and told us that he was 99% sure that she didn't have it. And it changed my life in so many ways, because I had been working just wherever I could get a job, and I decided that I was going to do different. And I went and got some books, and I tried to learn how to make bids, and I tried to learn how to estimate jobs. And God must have helped me, or someone must have helped me, because I finally learned to be able to do what I needed to do the kind of work I wanted to do. And I pursued that deal, and I went to this, when I finally bid a job down at the Arsenal, where I was known and people liked me. So I got a job down there. And when I got my job, I had finally, I thought that was all I had to do, but then somebody told me, said, well, I wasn't, you have to have a bond. And I said, how do I get a bond? That's how little I knew about what I was doing. And they said, you have to go to an insurance company. And I went to one of the ones in Pulaski, and they said they didn't write bonds. I had to go to Roanoke to get a bond. And they had told me beforehand for me to bring I had been operating a little business, and they said for me to bring all my paperwork with me, financial paperwork. And I did. And when I walked in, he said, did you bring your financial work with you? I said, yes, sir. And he said, let me see it. And he sat there about 40 minutes and looked it over. And he turned to me and he said, another man called me Red. He said, Red, I can't give you no bond. I said, why? He said, you're not worth anything. He told me just exactly like that. Said, you're not worth anything. I said, well, and he said, if I was to give you a bond, he said, they'd fire me. But when I got inside, I started to go out, because I figured, well, that's it. If he's going to get fired, I know he's not going to. And he hollered at me when I went out the door. He said, Red, come back here. He said, I'm going to give you this bond. And he said, if you let me down, he said, I'm going to shoot you. And I not only got the job, but I found there was a lot more to it. And I found that bond situation was a lot worse than I thought, because you were required to have as much money as the bond and to take care of the bond. And I didn't, but I made the first one by a lot of good people helping me. But there's one thing I learned out of it, was that if you wanted to have a good company, you had to surround yourself with good people. And most men were scared of that because they were afraid of the competition of good people. But I found that the more smart men I had around me, the better I done. And I found I was lucky enough to find some good men. And I had learned that in the Army, from the fact that I learned how to pick the kind of men that some others didn't like because they didn't drill good, but I wanted people that knowed how to work. And I had some fellows that helped me tremendously, because they taught me more than I ever taught them. Well, as the time went on, I did better and better in my business, and I think, I don't know whether it was that done it, or whether it was because I was willing to go that extra mile that a man needs to be successful in any endeavor. And the more he knowed how to do, and the more he depended on good people and had good people.
Well, I think you all have really told us quite a bit, and I'm very glad to have you here.
Thank you, Tony.
And you know, some of the things that came out here that didn't come out in the newspaper, I think were very interesting. Your insight into why the Germans went into World War II. Just a lot of things, and it's good to have both brothers here to give the whole complete picture. I thank you very much for what you've done today.
Thank you for having us.
Well, I think we agree with you that I think it's just remarkable that you would want to do this, because when you think about it, a man 100 years from now might say, well, what kind of people were they? Now he may get completely staggered when he listens to some of this stuff, but on the other hand, he might make something out of it.
Well, we've had a world of experience. I have in a lot of different things, done a lot of different things, lived a long life. We've got a lot of friends, and we have especially a lot of good ones at McDonald's, which I just wanted to mention briefly about those people. They're just such good people that we've both been reasonably successful and done pretty well, and Pulaski's been good to us, and the county has, and we've just got a world of things to be thankful for, and the Lord's been good to us.
Well,
we're glad we're here.
And we're thankful you are too.
Thank you. Thank you very much.